The neon lights of New York City flickered in the drizzle, casting a hazy glow over the slick streets. It was the late 1980s, and the city pulsed with a relentless energy, where danger lurked around every corner, and secrets were buried in the shadows. In a nondescript office building in the heart of Manhattan, a man known only to a select few as Jack Hunter sat in the corner of a dimly lit room, his silhouette barely discernible against the backdrop of the city's skyline. Jack was a man of few words, but his reputation spoke volumes. A private detective with a lethal aim, he was a legend in the underworld, a ghost that moved through the city's dark underbelly with precision and purpose. He had taken on cases that would make most men tremble, and he had done so with an uncanny calmness that bordered on eerie. He sat now, his feet propped up on the edge of his cluttered desk, idly twirling a silver lighter between his fingers. His face was obscured by the brim of his fedora, but the faint glow of a cigarette illuminated the sharp angles of his jaw. His mind was far from the room, drifting somewhere between the past and the present, always alert, always calculating. Across from him, leaning casually against a filing cabinet, was Kate Miller. Tall, with a cascade of auburn hair and piercing blue eyes, Kate was as fierce as she was intelligent. She had a knack for technology, something that Jack had learned to rely on more than he would ever admit. She was his partner in every sense of the word, balancing his brute force with her sharp wit and technical expertise. "You know, Jack," Kate began, her voice cutting through the quiet, "I was up half the night decrypting that last set of files. Turns out, our friend in the docks has been funneling more than just illegal goods." Jack exhaled a stream of smoke, not bothering to look up. "What's he moving?" "Information," Kate replied, pushing off the cabinet and walking over to the window. She pulled the curtain back just enough to peek at the street below. "Sensitive stuff. Government contracts, military blueprints. Someone high up is selling secrets, and our guy is the middleman." "Typical," Jack muttered, finally flicking the lighter closed and slipping it into his coat pocket. "But that's not our problem anymore." Kate turned, arching an eyebrow. "You really think so? We're talking about a major breach here, Jack. Whoever's behind this could start a war." Jack shrugged. "We did the job we were paid to do." "We're not heroes, Kate." Before Kate could argue, the door to the office creaked open. Both Jack and Kate tensed instinctively, their hands moving to their weapons. But it wasn't an enemy that stepped into the room. It was a man in a tailored suit, his demeanor calm, but with an air of urgency that was impossible to miss. "Mr. Hunter, Miss Miller," the man said, his voice smooth and practiced. "I apologize for the intrusion, but I'm in need of your services." Jack's eyes narrowed as he studied the newcomer. The man was in his mid-40s, with slick-back hair and a face that spoke of money and influence. He carried himself with the confidence of someone who was used to getting what he wanted, and Jack could see right through it. "Who are you?" Jack asked, his tone flat. "Thompson," the man replied, his eyes darting between Jack and Kate. "Charles Thompson. I work for a private organization that handles certain delicate matters." "I was told you were the best." Kate crossed her arms, skepticism written all over her face. "And what kind of delicate matter are we talking about, Mr. Thompson?" Thompson took a deep breath, as if weighing his next words carefully. "A microchip," he said finally. "One that contains information that, if released, could destabilize global markets. It was stolen from one of our facilities, and we believe it's now in the hands of a criminal syndicate." Jack leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "Sounds like a job for the feds. Why come to us?" "Because," Thompson said, stepping closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper, "the people who stole it are not just criminals. They're connected to government officials, military personnel, and international arms dealers. If the chip isn't recovered discreetly, the fallout could be catastrophic." Jack exchanged a glance with Kate, who was already running scenarios in her head. The stakes were high, and they both knew it. But there was something about this Thompson that didn't sit right with Jack. The man was too polished, too controlled. There was more to this than he was letting on. "We're not interested," Jack said, stubbing out his cigarette in the ashtray. "Find someone else." Thompson's eyes widened in surprise. "Mr. Hunter, I assure you—" "Save it," Jack interrupted, his voice cold. "I don't trust suits who walk in here with stories about global conspiracies. You're hiding something, and I'm not about to risk my neck for half-truths. Thompson hesitated, then reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a small, sleek case. He opened it to reveal a stack of cash and a black-and-white photograph. "This is just a retainer," he said, placing the case on the desk. "And that," he pointed to the photograph, "is Victor Drake. He's the one who has the chip. You might want to reconsider." Jack picked up the photograph, studying the face of the man it depicted. Victor Drake, a name that carried weight in the criminal underworld. He was known for being ruthless, smart, and nearly impossible to catch. The last time Jack had crossed paths with him, it hadn't ended well. Jack sighed, tossing the photograph back on the desk. "You should have led with that," Kate smirked, sensing the shift in Jack's demeanor. "Guess we're back in business?" "Looks like it," Jack replied, his tone resigned but resolute. "But let's get one thing straight, Thompson. We do this our way, no interference. And if you're holding anything back, you better spill it." And Thompson nodded, visibly relieved. "You have my word." Jack didn't trust words, especially not from men like Thompson. But the mention of Victor Drake changed everything. This wasn't just about a microchip anymore. It was personal. As Thompson left the office, Jack and Kate exchanged a knowing look. The hunt was on, and in the concrete jungle of New York, the only rule was to survive. Jack reached for his gun, feeling its familiar weight in his hand. "Let's go catch a ghost," he said, the corner of his mouth twitching into a rare smile. Kate grabbed her jacket, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. "Lead the way, Hunter. It's time to show them why they fear the night." And with that, they stepped out into the rain-soaked streets, where shadows danced and danger awaited around every corner. The city was their battlefield, and tonight, the Silent Marksman would once again prove why he was the best. The night was heavy with the scent of rain as Jack and Kate stepped out of their office, their breath visible in the cool, damp air. The city buzzed around them, alive with the nocturnal activities of those who thrived in the darkness. Jack adjusted the collar of his trench coat, his eyes scanning the crowded streets, already calculating their next move. "We'll start at O'Malley's," Jack said, his voice cutting through the ambient noise of honking cars and distant sirens. "It's a dive, but it's where people like Victor's men go to drink and talk too much." Kate nodded, slipping into the passenger seat of Jack's classic Mustang. The engine roared to life, and they sped off into the night, the city lights blurring past them. O'Malley's was exactly as Jack remembered it. Dim, smoky, and reeking of spilled beer and bad decisions. The kind of place where the bartender didn't ask questions, and the patrons were too busy with their own troubles to notice newcomers. Jack and Kate walked in like they owned the place, drawing a few curious glances before the regulars returned to their drinks. Jack's eyes quickly scanned the room, landing on a group of men huddled in a corner booth. They were gruff, rough around the edges, and exactly the kind of people who might know something about Victor Drake's operations. Jack nudged Kate, who was already on the same page, and they made their way over. "Mind if we join you?" Jack asked, his tone deceptively friendly as he slid into the booth without waiting for an answer. Kate followed, her eyes locked on the men, daring them to make a move. One of the men, a burly guy with a scar running down his cheek, sneered. "Who the hell are you?" "Just someone looking for a chat," Jack replied casually, leaning back in his seat. "Maybe you boys can help us out." "We're not interested," Scarface growled, clearly unimpressed. Jack smiled, his hand moving under the table, where the gleam of a gun's barrel suddenly pressed against Scarface's thigh. The man stiffened, his bravado evaporating. "That wasn't a request." Kate leaned in, her voice smooth and calm. "We're looking for Victor Drake. We know he's in town and we know you work for him. So let's make this easy. You tell us what we want to know and we leave you with both kneecaps intact." The men exchanged uneasy glances, clearly weighing their options. Finally, Scarface grumbled. "Drake's been laying low, but he's making moves. Last I heard, he's staying in a penthouse uptown. Real fancy place. But good luck getting close. He's got the whole building locked down tight." Jack's smile widened. "See? That wasn't so hard. Now one more thing. Who else is after him?" Scarface hesitated, but the cold press of Jack's gun reminded him that honesty was the best policy. "Word on the street is that some government spooks are in town too. They've been sniffing around, asking questions. Don't know who they are, but they're bad news. Jack withdrew his gun, slipping it back into his coat as he stood. Much appreciated. Kate gave the men a final, icy stare before following Jack out. As they walked to the car, she glanced at him, her expression both amused and exasperated. You know, one day your charming methods are going to get us killed. Maybe, Jack replied with a shrug, but until then, they get results. The penthouse that Scarface had mentioned was a far cry from O'Malley's. It was a sleek, modern fortress perched high above the city, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of Manhattan. Jack and Kate approached cautiously, their eyes constantly scanning for threats. The building's security was as tight as advertised. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter, and the only entrance was through a heavily guarded lobby. Subtlety isn't his style, Kate remarked, her voice barely above a whisper, as they observed from a distance. No, but it makes him predictable, Jack replied, his mind already working out a plan. We'll go in through the service entrance. It's less guarded, and I can disable the cameras once we're inside. They moved swiftly and silently, slipping past the guards and into the service entrance. The building's maintenance corridors were narrow and dimly lit, perfect for staying out of sight. As they approached the security room, Kate's fingers danced over her portable device, hacking into the building's system to disable the alarms. Inside the security room, a lone guard sat monitoring the camera feeds. He never saw Jack coming. In a flash, Jack had the man in a chokehold, rendering him unconscious without a sound. Kate quickly took over the console, shutting down the cameras and unlocking the elevator to the penthouse. Elevator's clear, Kate said, nodding towards the door. Let's move. The ride up was tense, the hum of the elevator the only sound. Jack adjusted his grip on his gun, while Kate double-checked her equipment. They were going in blind, but they had come too far to turn back now. The elevator doors slid open, revealing the luxurious interior of Victor Drake's penthouse. The place was opulent, with marble floors, expensive artwork, and a view that would take anyone's breath away. But Jack wasn't here for the view. They moved quickly, sweeping through the rooms, guns drawn. The penthouse was eerily quiet, too quiet for Jack's liking. Something wasn't right. Jack, Kate called softly from the next room. He hurried over, finding her standing in what looked like a study. On the desk was a single, ominous message displayed on a computer screen. Too late, Hunter. See you at the docks. Damn it, Jack cursed, slamming his fist on the desk. He knew we were coming. Looks like we're playing catch-up, Kate said, her voice tinged with frustration. The docks, that's where he's making his move. Jack nodded, his mind racing. Let's not keep him waiting. The docks were shrouded in mist, the perfect setting for a final confrontation. Crates and shipping containers loomed like monoliths, casting long shadows that merged with the night. Jack and Kate moved stealthily, aware that they were walking into a trap but with no other choice. As they approached the central loading area, they spotted Victor Drake standing amidst a group of armed men. The microchip in question was in his hand, glinting in the dim light. Nice of you to join us, Hunter, Victor called out, his voice dripping with mockery. I was beginning to think you'd lost your touch. Jack stepped forward, his gun trained on Victor, while Kate covered him from behind. Give it up, Drake. You're cornered. Victor laughed, a low, menacing sound that echoed through the empty docks. Oh, Jack, always so confident. But I'm afraid you're the one who's cornered. At his signal, more men appeared from the shadows, surrounding Jack and Kate. It was an ambush, and they were outnumbered. Looks like you brought a knife to a gunfight, Victor sneered, raising his gun. But before he could pull the trigger, the sound of gunfire erupted from above. Victor's men fell one by one, taken out by unseen snipers. Jack and Kate ducked for cover, returning fire as chaos erupted around them. In the confusion, Victor made a break for it, disappearing into the maze of containers. His voice was vaguely heard on the wind. Goodbye, Jack. Never see you again. The night air was thick with the scent of rust and decay as Jack and Kate made their way through the outskirts of the city. They were heading to an abandoned warehouse, a relic from New York's industrial past, now a crumbling skeleton hidden away from the bustling streets. It was the kind of place where secrets festered and memories lingered, exactly where Jack didn't want to be. The warehouse loomed ahead, its broken windows like empty eyes staring into the darkness. Jack's jaw tightened as he led the way, his footsteps echoing in the eerie silence. Kate followed closely, her senses on high alert, though she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Jack had been quiet, too quiet, since their encounter with Victor at the docks. His usual sharpness was dulled, his focus wavering in a way she hadn't seen before. Inside the warehouse, the air was musty, filled with the smell of dust and forgotten things. They moved cautiously through the debris-strewn space, their flashlights casting long, flickering shadows on the walls. Every creak and groan of the old structure made the hairs on the back of Kate's neck stand on end, but it wasn't the warehouse that unsettled her. It was Jack. He was on edge, his movements tense, as if he were bracing for something unseen. They reached a door at the far end of the warehouse, partially ajar, leading to a set of stairs descending into darkness. Jack paused, his hand on the door, and for a moment he seemed lost in thought. "Jack," Kate called softly, breaking the silence. "You okay?" Jack didn't answer immediately. His eyes were fixed on the door, but his mind was elsewhere. Somewhere deep in the recesses of his past, memories flashed through his mind, unbidden and unwanted. He could see her face, her smile, and then the blood. So much blood. He blinked, forcing the images away, and took a deep breath. "Yeah," he finally replied, his voice rougher than usual. "I'm fine. Let's go." Kate watched him carefully as they descended into the underground bunker. The stairs creaked under their weight, and the air grew colder the deeper they went. The bunker was a labyrinth of narrow corridors and concrete walls, a hidden relic from the days of the Cold War. It was the perfect place for someone like Victor Drake to hide away, or to conduct business far from prying eyes. They followed the faint sound of a generator humming somewhere in the depths of the bunker. The corridors twisted and turned, each one identical to the last, until they finally reached a large room that had once served as a command center. Now it was a makeshift office, with computers, maps, and scattered documents. But what caught Jack's attention wasn't the technology, it was the wall. Pinned across the wall were photographs, clippings, and handwritten notes, all connected by a web of red string. At the center of it all was a picture of Victor Drake, but surrounding him were faces that Jack recognized all too well. Old friends, allies, and enemies. And there in the middle of it all was a face that Jack had tried to forget for years. Her name was Lily, and she had been everything to Jack, a partner, a confidant, and more than that, the woman he loved. But she had died years ago in an operation that had gone horribly wrong. An operation that, as Jack now realized, Victor Drake had been involved in. Jack's heart pounded in his chest as he stared at the photograph of Lily, her smile frozen in time. The pain of her loss hit him like a sledgehammer, threatening to break through the walls he had built around his emotions. He had buried those memories deep, but now they were resurfacing, brought back to life by the man who had caused them. "Jack!" Kate's voice pulled him back to the present. She was standing beside him, her expression a mix of concern and curiosity. "Who is she?" Jack didn't answer right away. His throat felt tight, and his hands clenched into fists at his sides. Finally he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Her name was Lily. She was important to me. We were on a mission together years ago. It went bad, and she didn't make it." Kate's eyes softened as she listened. "And Drake was involved?" Jack nodded, unable to tear his eyes away from Lily's photo. "I didn't know it at the time, but he was the one pulling the strings. He set us up, got her killed. I never had proof, until now." Kate placed a hand on Jack's shoulder, her touch grounding him in the moment. "We'll get him, Jack." "For her." Jack turned to face Kate, the pain in his eyes stark and raw. "This isn't just about her, Kate. It's about stopping him from doing to someone else what he did to us. But I can't let this cloud my judgment. Not again." Kate held his gaze, her voice steady and reassuring. "You won't. We're in this together. But you need to keep your head clear, or he'll win." Jack nodded, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. "You're right. Let's see what else we can find here." They turned their attention back to the room, searching through the documents and files that littered the desk. It didn't take long before they found what they were looking for, a detailed plan outlining Victor Drake's next move. He was planning to auction the stolen microchip to the highest bidder, a group of international arms dealers and corrupt officials who would pay a fortune for the power it held. The auction was scheduled to take place the following night at a private location, an exclusive club hidden in the heart of the city. The stakes couldn't be higher. If that chip fell into the wrong hands, the consequences would be catastrophic. Jack's jaw clenched as he read through the details. Victor had outmaneuvered them at every turn, but now they had the upper hand. They knew where he would be, and they knew what he wanted. It was time to put an end to this game. "We have to stop that auction," Kate said, her voice resolute. "But it's going to be a bloodbath. He'll have every mercenary and hired gun in the city there to protect him." "Then we'll have to be smarter," Jack replied, his mind already working through the plan. "We'll need backup, and we'll need to get in and out before anyone knows we're there." Kate nodded, her determination matching his. "And what about Thompson? You think he's playing us?" Jack's eyes darkened at the mention of Thompson. "Definitely. He's been pulling strings of his own. We'll deal with him, but first we take down Drake." They left the bunker with a renewed sense of purpose, but the shadows of Jack's past still lingered in the back of his mind. He couldn't afford to let his emotions get the better of him, not when so much was at stake. But as they prepared for the final confrontation, one thing was certain. This wasn't just about stopping a criminal mastermind anymore. It was personal, and Jack wouldn't rest until Victor Drake paid for what he had done. The city loomed around them as they emerged from the depths of the bunker, the lights of New York twinkling like distant stars. The final showdown was drawing near, and in the concrete jungle, only the strongest would survive. The evening sky over New York City was a deep indigo, tinged with the last hues of sunset as Jack and Kate arrived at the Grand Arcadia Hotel. The towering building, a symbol of opulence and excess, glimmered with 1,000 lights, its grand facade hiding the dark dealings that were about to unfold within. The streets outside bustled with luxury cars and elegantly dressed patrons, but beneath the surface, the tension was palpable. Dressed to blend in, Jack and Kate stepped out of their rented limousine, their appearances meticulously crafted to fit the part. Jack, in a tailored black tuxedo, looked every bit the wealthy and powerful businessman he was pretending to be. Kate, stunning in an emerald green evening gown that accentuated her sharp features, walked beside him with a grace that masked her lethal prowess. As they entered the hotel's grand lobby, the atmosphere was thick with anticipation. The auction was about to begin, and the room was filled with some of the most dangerous individuals in the world: crime lords, arms dealers, corrupt politicians, and shadowy figures whose allegiances were as murky as the waters they navigated. Jack and Kate had to move carefully, every step calculated, every glance measured. They made their way to the ballroom where the auction was taking place, their invitations, procured through a mix of bribery and subterfuge, gaining them entrance. The room was a study in decadence, with chandeliers casting a warm glow over the assembled guests, and waiters gliding silently between them, offering champagne and hors d'oeuvres. But beneath the polished veneer, the air crackled with danger. Jack's eyes scanned the room, taking in every detail. He spotted Victor Drake near the front, engaged in quiet conversation with a man who radiated an air of authority. The microchip, the object of everyone's desire, was displayed in a glass case on a raised platform, its innocuous appearance belying the chaos it could unleash. Victor's gaze briefly met Jack's across the room, and for a split second, something dark and knowing flickered in his eyes before he turned away. "Stay close," Jack whispered to Kate, his hand lightly brushing her arm as they moved through the crowd. "We can't afford any slip-ups." Kate nodded, her expression focused but calm. "I'll keep an eye on Victor. You take care of the chip." The auctioneer, a slim man with a smooth voice and a sharp suit, began the proceedings with an air of practiced charm. He listed the virtues of the microchip, emphasizing its unique value and the unparalleled opportunities it would afford its owner. The bidding started high and quickly escalated, the room abuzz with murmured calculations and exchanged glances. Jack edged closer to the platform, positioning himself within striking distance of the case. His heart raced, but his movements were controlled, each step deliberate. Kate, meanwhile, maneuvered herself into a position where she could watch Victor without drawing attention. The tension between them was unspoken but understood. They had one shot at this. As the bidding reached a fever pitch, Jack saw his moment. The auctioneer called out for final bids, and Jack moved, swift and precise. In one fluid motion, he slipped a small device out of his jacket, a jammer that would disrupt the security systems for just a few precious seconds. He activated it, and the lights flickered, the room plunging into momentary confusion. In that instant, Jack reached the platform, smashing the glass case with the hilt of his gun and grabbing the microchip. But as he did, a cold voice rang out from across the room. "Stop them!" It was Victor. He had been watching, waiting for just this moment. With a flick of his wrist, he signaled his men, who instantly drew their weapons, turning the elegant ballroom into a battlefield. Jack ducked as bullets flew, his instincts taking over as he returned fire with deadly accuracy. Kate was a blur of motion, her evening gown not hindering her in the slightest as she took down two of Victor's henchmen with swift, precise shots. The guests scrambled for cover, screams mingling with the sharp cracks of gunfire. "Get to the back exit!" Jack shouted over the chaos, covering Kate as she made a break for it. They had the chip, but the entire room was now against them, and Victor was determined not to let them escape. They fought their way through the melee, Jack's sharp shooting keeping their pursuers at bay, while Kate hacked into the hotel's security system through a portable device, locking doors and triggering alarms to create further confusion. But just as they reached the exit, Victor appeared, his gun aimed squarely at Jack. "Give me the chip, Hunter," Victor demanded, his voice low and menacing. "Or this ends here." Jack didn't hesitate. He raised his gun, but before he could fire, Victor threw a smoke grenade, filling the corridor with thick, choking fumes. The world around them dissolved into a haze, and in the confusion, Victor made his move, knocking the chip from Jack's hand and vanishing into the smoke. "Damn it!" Jack cursed, trying to chase after him, but the smoke was too thick. He could hear Victor's footsteps retreating, followed by the screech of tires as he made his getaway. Kate emerged from the smoke, coughing but unharmed. "He's heading for the garage. We can still catch him." They bolted for the nearest stairwell, taking the steps two at a time, the adrenaline surging through their veins. The hotel's underground garage was a cavernous space, echoing with the sounds of engines and screeching tires. Victor's sleek black car was already peeling out, heading for the exit. Jack didn't waste a second. He hot-wired the nearest car, a nondescript sedan, and they tore out of the garage in pursuit. The chase was on, the streets of New York becoming a blur of neon and asphalt as they weaved through traffic, narrowly avoiding collisions as they closed in on Victor. Kate worked the GPS, tracking Victor's movements in real time. "He's heading towards the bridge. If we don't stop him before he crosses, we'll lose him in the city." Jack gritted his teeth, pushing the car to its limits. "Not gonna happen." They sped through the night, the city lights flashing by in a disorienting blur. Jack's focus was razor-sharp, his eyes locked on Victor's car as they closed the distance. But Victor was a master at this game, taking sharp turns and cutting through alleyways in an attempt to shake them off. The chase culminated on the Brooklyn Bridge, the towering structure looming ahead as they raced across the span. Victor was running out of road, and Jack knew it was now or never. He floored the gas pedal, ramming their car into Victor's, sending it skidding across the lanes. The first light of dawn began to break over New York City, casting a soft, golden glow on the towering skyscrapers. High above the streets, on the rooftop of an old, abandoned building, Jack Hunter stood alone, his silhouette stark against the emerging light. The city stretched out before him, a vast, sprawling maze of concrete and steel, but his focus was on the man standing opposite him, Victor Drake. The rooftop was desolate, a forgotten corner of the city where no one would hear the echoes of what was about to transpire. The air was crisp, the faint hum of the city below the only sound, as Jack and Victor faced each other, their gazes locked in a silent battle of wills. Victor was battered, his clothes torn and bloodied from the chase and the fight that had led them here, but his eyes burned with a cold, calculating fury. Despite his condition, he exuded a dark charisma, a man who had played the game for too long to be easily intimidated. "You've been a thorn in my side for too long, Hunter," Victor spat, his voice laced with contempt. "But it ends here." Jack remained silent, his gun steady in his hand as he kept it trained on Victor. His mind raced, replaying the events that had brought them to this point. The lies, the betrayals, the blood that had been spilled. But more than anything, it was the memory of Lily and the life that Victor had stolen from him that fueled his resolve. "You killed her," Jack finally said, his voice low and controlled, but tinged with the pain he had carried for years. "Lily didn't have to die, but you made sure she did." Victor's lips curled into a cruel smile. She was collateral damage, Hunter, just like you were supposed to be. But I underestimated you. That was my mistake. Jack's grip on his gun tightened. This isn't about your games anymore, Drake. It's about making sure you never hurt anyone again. Victor's smile faded, replaced by a look of steely determination. You're a fool, Hunter. You think taking me down will end this? You're just scratching the surface of something far bigger than either of us. Before Jack could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed from behind him. He didn't turn, he didn't need to. He already knew who it was. Mr. Thompson? Jack said, his voice devoid of surprise. Charles Thompson emerged from the shadows, his polished demeanor a stark contrast to the grim setting. He was as composed as ever, but there was a dangerous glint in his eyes as he approached, his hands clasped behind his back. Well done, Hunter, Thompson said, his tone dripping with false praise. You've done exactly what I needed you to do. Jack's eyes narrowed, his suspicions confirmed. You've been pulling the strings from the start. Thompson smiled, a cold, calculating expression that sent a chill down Jack's spine. Indeed. You see, both you and Victor were necessary to achieve my goals. Victor had the resources, the connections, but he lacked the ability to execute without drawing attention. You, on the other hand, are the perfect blunt instrument, skilled, relentless, but ultimately predictable. Victor's eyes widened in realization, a snarl forming on his lips. You used me? Thompson turned to Victor, his smile never wavering. I used both of you. The microchip was never about money or power. It was a test, a way to identify the key players in the global underworld and to eliminate those who might stand in my way. You played your parts perfectly. Jack's mind raced, piecing together the implications of Thompson's words. He had been a pawn in a game far more complex than he had realized, but now the game was reaching its end. What now? Jack asked, his voice calm but with an edge of defiance. You take the chip, disappear, and leave us to clean up the mess? Thompson's smile widened. Something like that, but I'm afraid I can't let you walk away, Jack. You've seen too much. Just as Thompson reached into his jacket, presumably for a weapon, a sharp, sudden shot rang out. Thompson froze, a look of shock crossing his face as he slowly looked down to see blood blossoming on his chest. He staggered, the control he prided himself on slipping away as he fell to his knees. Behind him, Kate stood, her gun still raised, her expression hard as stone. Not today, she said coldly, her voice echoing in the quiet dawn. Jack's eyes flicked between Kate and Thompson, and for a moment everything seemed to pause. Thompson gasped for breath, his eyes full of disbelief as he crumpled to the ground, the life draining out of him. Victor took advantage of the distraction, lunging at Jack in a final, desperate attempt to turn the tide. But Jack was faster. He sidestepped Victor's attack and with a swift, precise movement, disarmed him and sent him sprawling to the ground. Victor groaned, clutching his side as he tried to rise. But Jack was already standing over him, his gun aimed directly at Victor's head. It's over, Jack said, his voice steady and final. Victor looked up at Jack, his eyes filled with a mix of hatred and resignation. Go ahead, Hunter. Finish it. For a moment, Jack considered it. All the pain, all the loss could be avenged with a single pull of the trigger. But then he remembered Lily, her smile, her kindness, the way she had always believed in doing the right thing, even when it was hard. Jack lowered his gun. You're not worth it. Victor's face twisted in anger, but there was nothing he could do. Jack turned away, signaling Kate to follow him. She hesitated for a moment, glancing down at Thompson's lifeless body, before joining Jack at the edge of the rooftop. The first rays of sunlight began to pierce the horizon, bathing the city in a soft golden light. Jack and Kate stood side by side, the weight of everything that had happened settling over them like a heavy cloak. What now? Kate asked, her voice quiet. Jack pulled the microchip from his pocket, holding it up to the light. It was a small, unassuming thing, but it had the power to cause untold destruction. With a final decisive movement, he crushed it under his boot, grinding it into the concrete until it was nothing more than shards of plastic and metal. Now, Jack said, exhaling deeply, we move on. Kate nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of her lips. Ready for the next adventure? Jack turned to her, a hint of a smile on his own face. Always. As they stood there, watching the city wake up beneath them, The unspoken bond between them solidified, one forged in fire and blood, but tempered by trust and mutual respect. The tension between them lingered, unresolved, but it was a tension that neither of them was in a hurry to resolve. The city was vast and the world was full of shadows. But for now they had each other, and that was enough. Together they turned away from the edge of the rooftop and began their descent back into the city, ready to face whatever came next.